All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Will the meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission for Wednesday, January 17th, 2018, please come to order? For the benefit of those who may or may not have participated in the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, our procedures are as follows. 1, we will read the legal call of the meeting as published in local newspapers. The applicant will be invited to come forward and present their case, explaining to the commission and others present what is being requested of the property. Comments of town agencies will be read for each application if there are any. 3, there will be clarifying questions from the commissioners. Then there will be an opportunity for clarifying questions from the audience. First, those who wish to support the application may come forward, and second, those who oppose the application will be invited to come forward and express their opinion. As this is a public hearing and must be recorded, it's necessary for all speakers to identify themselves by stating their name and their address before addressing this commission. The applicant is then free to leave or remain for the balance of the public hearing and the regular meeting, at which time the commission will try to reach a decision on each application. Each applicant will be notified in writing as to the decision of this commission and has a right to appeal to Superior Court if desired. Decisions of this meeting are available the day after the meeting by calling the Planning and Zoning Office at 203-453-8039 after 9 a.m. So tonight we have the following members. We have Phil Johnson, we have Rich Meyer, we have Alan Brown, we have Josh Hirschman. I'm Frank DeAndrea. We have Dick Wallace, and we have Matthew Yorzinski. Staff present tonight, we have George Kroll, we have Lisa Piombino, and our videographer this evening is Peter Schultz. Secretary, will you now read the legal notice?
Notice is hereby given that the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission will hold a public hearing on January 17th at 7:30 p.m. at the Nathaniel B. Green Community Center, 32 Church Street, Guilford, Connecticut, in the Monunketuck Room on the second floor for the following purpose. Guilford Yacht Club, 379 Whitfield Street, map 29, lot 11, zone MR1, coastal area management site plan modification to allow for installation of 2 storage sheds. Request from Guilford Yacht Club to amend table 5, line 27, to allow public restaurants by special permit in the MR1 zone. Copies of these applications are available for inspection at the Office of the Planning and Zoning Commission, Town Hall South, 50 Boston Street, Guilford, Connecticut. At this hearing, persons may attend and be heard, and written communication will be received. Dated at Guilford, Connecticut, the second day of January 2018, Frank DeAndrea, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, so let's get right to it. We have the public hearing on Guilford Yacht Club. Somebody here to present?
Yes, sir.
Come on up. Yeah, please. And that mic's for the
Sure.
TV.
Not a problem. I'm Patrick Doyle, representing the Unit Owners Association at the Guilford Yacht Club, who put in the application for the existing sheds to bring them into conformance. We submitted the application a month ago and then had some correspondence back and forth with DEP. We revised our plot plans to identify flood zones and distance to tidal water, and are looking for the committee to approve these existing sheds. One shed has been the smaller shed closer to the tide line, which according to Kevin McGee's memo from today is 38 feet from the tide line, has been in place since at least 1998 in its current location. The newer shed was installed 2008, 2009 timeframe, and has been in place since then. We understand the sheds they're both smaller than 1,000 square feet, so that there was some question even where we had to go with permitting, but we are proceeding with the CAM authorization as required.
So we kind of flip-flop this. That's okay, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, was the other one first?
Yeah, but that's okay.
Oh.
Just want to make sure everybody's aware. This is
There's only
the,
2 things on
this is the
Yeah.
The plans?
Sure. This is a revised plan that was prepared in response to the DEP's request for modification or additional information. But it shows the flood zone area being outside where the sheds are located, and it shows basically where the tide line or tidal marsh areas are on the new diagram. How this came up? Yeah, part of our second reason for being here tonight was the operation of a members-only restaurant at the Guilford Yacht Club this summer. And we were in growing pains in terms of the mechanisms by which we would validate and verify guests of members coming, and 3 members of the town came to lunch, enjoyed their lunch, but weren't asked the appropriate questions, didn't fill out the right paperwork that was required for a guest of a member, and at the same time noticed the sheds were in place and recognized they weren't on the site plan for the Guilford Yacht Club.
Yeah, that was your mistake.
Exactly. I don't know how I present this, or who wants to see it, or how to see it.
So this is outside the tide area, but is this in a velocity zone, AE zone, or VE zone, do you know?
No, according to this diagram, it's not. It's above X. It's above 10.
It's above 10, okay.
Below 12?
That I can't add. It's above 10. It says, I think it's right on 12. It says 10 and 2%. Elevation AE 12 is outside of it. It's on the same level as our parking lot.
And is there anything bad in these sheds?
Anything?
What's in the sheds?
What's in the sheds?
The larger shed is primarily used for junior sailing equipment, sails, the tender, deflated tender, life flotation devices, and other equipment. And the smaller shed is tools, no fuel, no gasoline, no oils. Those are stored elsewhere in the club.
George, can you address, if they were to build these new right now, what additional provisions they would have to take on with the flood zone prevention ordinances?
Would they be subject to those requirements?
174.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, maybe we can figure that out between now and the next meeting. Just,
This is one public hearing.
really?
Well, they gotta come back anyway, we can continue it.
If you want.
I'm just curious, like, if it was new now, how close are they to conforming to the regulations, if it was new now versus now after the fact? And I mean, I only ask because it's come up a lot of late, and we've been pretty adamant with people about making sure that they're at least close to compliant, because it relates to a lot of flood insurance issues for everyone in town.
Well, I do know that one of the buildings, the larger one, is tied down to the subsurface through some kind of mechanism. And then the smaller one is not. It's basically just on pallets, if I understand it correctly. Right. And that's the one that's been there the longest.
Since 1998 or
Right.
earlier, yes.
Right. Well, one thing you could do is require as a condition of approval that they go to the building official to ascertain whether or not any provisions would be required with respect to the flood damage prevention ordinance, or under the flood damage
The big
prevention.
concern is, flood comes, lifts the building up, floats it down, smashes it into someone's house, and we've approved it. And we've approved it without any conditions for securing it in place. So it creates some liability on the part of the town, which we might be able to get around if there's an easy way to secure it.
Yeah, the only thing I would have to fall back is on history, and again, the 2 storms where we had lots of damage on the other side, boats floating off of parking lots. Our parking lots didn't get wet. This area was dry, fully dry. It wasn't, it was zero impact.
And if it's not in an AE 12, then it's not subject. If it's not in the flood zone, then you're fine.
Why don't you show Mr. Johnson the map that was prepared by Stevens? It does have quite a bit of information on there in terms of elevations and
So there's the lines we're looking at. The 10 line comes around.
So where's my orientation in terms, okay, got it.
Yep.
So this is where the sheds are over here?
There's the sheds. This is
It's the-
an overall map.
All right.
This is here's the flood zone.
So I guess
Here's
I'm
the
curious
flood
as to
zone
where
mapping.
this is in relation to this. Like here and here?
Yep, that's right, exactly right there.
So if I'm looking at this, and this,
I don't see those tennis, or whatever those things are.
I don't see them
in this
either, but-
drawing, or in this photo. Here's
so here's the clubhouse.
This is, the engineers
Here's Clever.
identified the flood
You
zone
know,
boundaries.
We had the engineer identify the flood zone a few weeks ago, too.
Right, well, that's the best information we
Is that
have.
the guy on,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah,
no
yeah,
You can see these,
Yeah.
this is like, first floor here of 11-2, first
So
floor,
right.
the
So
buildings.
it's inside 12.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my only question is, are they subject, if, again, we're after the fact, but are they subject?
Right,
to
well, we
what-
could
and-
find that out by consulting with the building.
And it's not that it can't stay, it's just, are there any provisions that would need to take place to make sure that it remains safe for everyone?
Would there be, I mean, we could commit to sorting out a mechanism to secure it the same way the previous one was done, if we can get,
Or make it conditional to, subject to compliance with any flood zone provisions for buildings within an AE 12.
I think we should just let's hear from our building department, and and then we should decide next time. And then you guys will be able to figure it out by then. Yeah, perfect.
In the meantime, there's a couple letters I think should be read.
I'll do the one from DEP.
From Kevin McGee, the environmental planner. This after-the-fact application is for installation of 2 sheds. The shed shall have been installed on a gravel base within the boating storage area. The closest point from the tidal wetlands to the nearest shed is 38 feet. The installation of the shed would have had minor impact to the adjacent coastal resources, which consist of tidal wetlands and the West River.
Okay?
Do you have this? Do you want this?
I just got a copy of that today.
Then we have one from Hartford, DEP. Dear Commissioners, thank you for referring this coastal site plan review received December 5th, 2017 for us to review and comment. The project description, the applicant's request for a special permit to retain 2 sheds which were installed on property owned by the Guilford Yacht Club and unit owners Patrick Doyle and Scott Penny. The zoning district of MR1, which is a marine recreational district and is reserved for marine activities. The sheds are 10 foot by 14 foot, making them 140 square feet, one of them. The other is 12 by 24, making that 288 square feet, for a combined total of 428 feet. The purpose of the sheds is to store sailing equipment and other sundry marine-related items. The sheds are a reasonable accessory use to the marina. However, the location of coastal resources such as tidal wetlands have not been identified on the site plan. If the sheds do not impact coastal resources and are 25 feet or more away from the coastal waters and tidal wetlands, then we have no issue with the locations of these sheds on the property. Site plan deficiencies, tidal wetlands have not been identified on the site. How close are the sheds to the tidal wetlands on the sites? And are there any other coastal resources on the site? Please identify and locate on your site plan. Conclusion being, we hope that the comments are helpful to the Commission pursuant to Connecticut General Statutes 22A-110. We request that these comments be read into the record on the public hearing for this application. If we can be of further assistance to help you in this or any other coastal management matter, please feel free to contact us at 860-424-3138. Carol Sismansky, Analyst 2 on the Office of Long Island Sound Programs. I believe Kevin identified the wetlands.
Maps were developed subsequent to that, which did address those concerns. Kevin went out and actually measured the distance to the tidal wetlands, which he commented on in his map. Right.
Okay. I think that's it. Is there, we got any other questions over here, guys? Go ahead. Don't be bashful, Phil.
I guess I'm always curious in these situations when we're talking after the fact as to, whether or not any building permits were taken out and whether or not any inspections were done with respect to the construction. Obviously, quite a long time ago, but that seems to be always the trigger mechanism for, has it been inspected? And, I don't know whether or not we require these after the fact. George could probably speak to that more than I could.
Require building permits?
I mean,
Well, that's what I was suggesting that you might make as a condition of approval, that should you be inclined to approve it, that the applicant make a building permit application.
so basically what that does is it brings it into compliance. It sends the building official down saying, okay, you need to do, your electric needs to be GFI, whatever it is that he does. And kind of gets us off the hook and gets you into full compliance.
Okay. Anything else?
So, Bill, do you want to continue and wait to hear back from the building department, or do you want to make that as a condition of approval?
I
As a
have no
condition.
problem with the
Let's make it a
approvals,
condition.
as long as you're fine with conditions, or we can wait till the next meeting and get the answers and go, whatever the applicant would prefer. I'm confident either way we can proceed
Do you
forward with it.
understand that
It's
there's-
just,
I'm sorry.
sorry.
Yeah, there's two options. One is for the commission to basically table this or continue the hearing to the next meeting, which you're going to be at anyway. In the meantime, find out from the building official what, if anything, he would require to comply with the flood damage prevention ordinance or for any other building code-related matters, or ask the commission to close the public hearing, take action on this, presumably approve it with the condition that you make the application to the, so it's probably
I'd
601.
go with the first one. I'd rather know in advance as opposed to like have conditions hanging over me. If you're going to be here anyway, but it's your call. It's actually our call.
Well, no, yeah, I was just saying, I mean,
A question, does 12 overrule 10? If we comply with 10, since that's a federal law, a federal zone, what does 12 have to do with it?
That's the question that the building official would have, actually not the building official, but the town's flood damage prevention ordinance officer. If these buildings didn't exist,
Yeah.
if this was approved, then you'd have to go get a building permit.
Right.
The assistant town engineer would review the building permit application to determine the applicability of the town's flood damage prevention ordinance to these buildings and whether or not any improvements would be required to comply with the flood damage prevention ordinance. If this were, and that would depend on, the type of building and the use as well as the location relative to potential flooding.
You gotta come up here and get your name, please, and address just for the record.
Jack Evans, I'm Boston Street in Guilford, and part of the Guilford Yacht Club. The question, George, just so we go do what you want, do we have to comply with all that since we're not over 500 square feet? And I understood it's 1,000 square feet to comply, that we kick
I don't
in.
know the answer to that. That's the question that the flood damage prevention ordinance officer would have to answer. And he would also answer the question whether the fact that these buildings already exist, does that make any difference in terms of the applicability of the flood damage prevention ordinance?
Okay, so the conflict between, I think it's CMR 72, I think it's 52, which is calling out the minimum of 1,000 square feet, or maximum, your minimum of 1,000 square feet, is that in conflict with the
I
building
don't
code?
know. That's something that
Okay.
somebody else that's not here would have to answer.
Okay. Fair.
So you,
Yeah, I'm going to make a motion to continue the matter. I'll make a motion to continue.
Yeah.
You want to call it a vote?
No, they're gonna request a table, I think.
our very discreet conversation. Yeah, I guess I guess we'd request then that the committee tabled for the moment, and George, maybe you and I can chat tomorrow or the next day and sort out who we need to get down there and get the pieces going?
pardon me?
And then we can sort out the next step from there.
So
I made a
continue the hearing to,
I seconded it.
To, what was it?
To the next meeting.
Okay.
which is February, what is it? 7.
7.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any abstain, any noes? No? All right. Let's hear about the restaurant. I assume you're coming up again, sir.
Once again, Patrick Doyle, representing the Unit Owners Association at the Guilford Yacht Club. When we had the visit from the folks in town to the restaurant, and we didn't conform with some of the procedures that we had put in place, we received a letter highlighting the sheds and some need to come into conformance. Since that time, we provided to Reggie, before her retirement, a revised formal procedure and practice to effectively implement, or that should be effective if properly implemented, a control over allowing guests of members to visit the restaurant in their absence, which is a common practice and protocol. Yacht clubs around the East Coast, we've actually provided examples from Sewanaka and the New York Yacht Club that have very similar policies and practices in terms of inviting someone in your absence and having them sign in and be a guest and enjoy the restaurant and the location. During that process, there was some discussion, and it was very preliminary, to understand what our potential options would be to make it an open restaurant, and came to find out that in our zone, we don't have that ability. So we are asking for, I forget the word that was used, but for an authorization by special permit in the zone to allow a public restaurant access. I want to be clear that there's been no decision, and we haven't actually engaged the unit owners to have a conversation about having a public restaurant, because we want to know if we even could before we would create something in motion, create some sort of excitement, and then find out from the town that it wasn't a potential possibility for moving forward. So at this time, in an extremely preliminary way, but to understand what our options are, we're seeking this special variance, or whatever the word is, by special permit for the zone, so that then we can pursue with the unit owners if this is a desirable future for our operation and organization.
To be clear, they're requesting. Clarify even further, they're requesting an amendment to the zoning code to allow restaurants in the MR1 zone by special permit. That would
It's just an amendment, Jim.
That's an amendment to the code that would allow any property owner anywhere in the MR1 zone to make an application for a special permit to create a restaurant.
And this is the only MR1 zone?
You have a map that we
I
passed
saw it, I
out.
only saw this one, but the map is not very...
That is the only MR1 zone. There's other property other than the yacht club property in the MR1 zone. Most of it, if you study carefully that map, or if you know that area, most of that area is tidal wetlands. It really borders on either side of the West River. The only other non-wetland parcels are on the other side of the river, the Browns Boatyard, Bayberry Creek Marina property, and also the town-owned Chaffinch Island Park. Those are also in the MR1 zone on the other side of the river.
So George, the parcel of land that the town is trying to sell, or was trying to sell, was going to make it a sewage treatment plant, and then they were trying to sell it.
That's in the
Is that,
MR1
so
zone.
potentially, if someone wanted to build a really nice restaurant, they could purchase this property from the town and build a restaurant there.
Subject to the special permit approval, yes.
Right. So I guess I want to have a more clear understanding, or maybe the board should have a clearer understanding of what the limitations are on the size of this restaurant. In other words, I know that we have building codes, and I know that we sort of very loosely enforce them. But even loosely enforcing them, are we looking at potentially a very big place or a very small place?
I don't think anybody can really answer that question right now. Obviously, there's no limitation on the size proposed in the zoning code. It says public restaurant by special permit. So whatever limitations there are on any given proposal would be subject to the constraints of that particular site. Sewage disposal is going to be the major constraint on any restaurant development.
Yep.
The size of the parcel obviously is a constraint. The need for parking and the other kinds of requirements that go along with the restaurant are constraints, but there's no predetermined or fixed limitation on the size in the proposed zoning amendment.
How is it, what is allowed now by right at the location? I mean, we're talking about a public restaurant, but is it a private restaurant now, a private?
Marinas
I mean,
and
there's-
yacht clubs are allowed, and that includes ancillary facilities like the clubhouse facility that exists at the Guilford Yacht Club. But that's basically the marine-related recreation facilities are the only uses allowed in the MR1 zone. Although if someone will pass me their zoning book, we can actually look it up.
I have one other question, and certainly look it up. But back where I used to live, there was a marine sort of property just like this, and there was a restaurant called the Oak Beach Inn, and people would come in their boats and tie up and visit, and it got to be very, very, very popular. It was a hangout for 20-year-olds, and that's how long ago it was that I used to go there. So 40 years ago.
Not in Guilford.
On Long Island, where I used to live. So potentially, if we say yes to a restaurant, are we saying yes to not just a restaurant, but a nightclub, a restaurant with a bar? And could that bar then be, like, after 11 o'clock, be the main draw and people zooming in on their boats and, and this is not what you have in mind, that it's what we're saying yes to. So if you decide to sell the property at some point and later someone who owns the property decides to put in a swinging nightclub, we may be saying yes to that now. So I'm trying to gain a clear understanding of what it is I'm saying yes to. Right now, it's a small restaurant or a restaurant for a yacht club, but potentially we could be saying yes to something considerably bigger. And
Why is it defined as public if you're a guest of a member?
well,
That's about now. I mean,
They're asking for it to be public.
So right now, if you have a guest, your guest has to sign in. So why is that not
For
meeting their
example,
needs?
take Boom or something in Westbrook, right, in one of those marinas, anybody can go there.
Right.
So this is what this is gonna, this is what they're asking.
Is that the idea, is basically to open it up to the public, or is it somehow bringing it into compliance for guests of yacht club members?
Well, again, to be clear.
I know, we're just all hypothetical.
Yeah, at the moment, this is just to see if we can even consider the opportunity to open to the public without any discussions in any meaningful way with our existing unit owners. Right now, the restaurant was basically a small-scale lunch-only event, because there are different things going on at the club at other times that, we prohibit night activities on the weekends particularly. What we would be thinking about or proposing going forward, I wouldn't see the model, if we decided to do so, seeing the model change, at least for the foreseeable future, in terms of just having it this Tuesday through Sunday lunch kind of venue, because it keeps the venue open for other events on the evenings and weekends. Could that change? I mean, it certainly could, but the restaurant business is a challenging business, and so we're trying to take, we think are reasonable small steps, if allowed and then desired, to go forward.
You get complete discretion on the special permit to put any kind of stipulation we would want in there, I believe.
Something to sort of consider in the back of our minds is that when we had the whole issue down where the Rothworth property is, every restaurant owner over there made it very clear that it is impossible to sort of succeed when you put your where their properties are. The Stonehouse claims that they can't, and the Mooring has been claiming that they can't as well. I mean, take it for what it's worth,
Right.
but I think that look, I don't know.
I'm just trying to get at what the end goal, if the end goal is to have people other than just guests of members come in, and, sure.
Tom Davis, I live on Boston Street and at the Guilford Yacht Club. The simple answer is that right now, what we're seeking is, as somebody described, for the hours that we're open for the restaurant operation that we're running, for someone who knows that it's there, whether they've heard about it or we've advertised it, to drive down, go in and enjoy the restaurant. That's the simple answer. Currently, we have it that it's a member guest invited or introduced guest arrangement that's been vetted by Reggie and the team here in town. So that we're all set, but this is absolutely saying, for whatever the scale of the operation is, our scale right now is very small, but again, that could change obviously if the place changed hands. But absolutely, this is about allowing someone who knows that it's there to drive down and walk in and order a meal.
Letter here from Carol. Why don't you read it on the record? Because we're required to by the statutes. Dear Commissioners, thank you for referring this zoning text amendment received dated December 13, 2017 to us for review and comment. Zoning text amendment. The text amendment proposes to allow restaurants by special exemption in MR1 marine districts. Typically, marine districts are waterfront sites which have been reserved for water-dependent uses. We recommend that the Commission consider establishing some minimum standards for all marinas which may be considering adding a restaurant on the site. We offer the following for the Commissioner's consideration. Adding a public access component such as public access waterfront walkway or a public car top boat launch with reserved parking for the public, since the diminishment of the current and future water-dependent uses of the waterfront site are an adverse impact which must be mitigated. All parking requirements must be met for marina boat slips, and the square footage of the new restaurant use, including outdoor dining areas and decks, cantilevered decks overhang the water should not be permitted for the restaurant use or any other non-water dependent use. A sufficient number of restrooms should be available on site for restaurant patrons. The marina should have a pump out and holding tank available for boats on site. A minimum size and for parcel of the marina should be established before it can be considered for a non-water dependent use such as a restaurant. As a non-water dependent accessory use, the restaurant's square footage should not exceed a certain percentage of the entire parcel, such as 10%. Drive-through restaurants should be prohibited at marinas. Service should be walk-up, take-out, or sit-down. No food, beverages, delivery services to boats directly at a dock should be provided. Will transient boats be allowed to dock for purposes of eating at the restaurant? In any case, transient boats must be safely docked rather than lined up if consumers are arriving at the restaurant by boat. Water dependency. Marina districts are best reserved for water-dependent uses such as marinas which cannot be located on upland sites and require direct access to the water. Adding a restaurant to a marina site diminishes the current marina use as well as future water-dependent uses which cannot expand to areas now occupied by a restaurant use. The Connecticut Coastal Management Act states that the diminishing of a water-dependent use on a waterfront lot is adverse impact, that the adverse impact must be mitigated. Therefore, a restaurant which are established on marina site and open to the general public must include public access components such as public waterfront walkway or a car top boat launch with attendant reserved public parking spaces for general public. This requirement for public access component must be stated in the zoning regulations if restaurants are permitted at the marina. Conclusion, adding a non-water dependent use such as a restaurant to water dependent use such as an active marina can be consistent with the Connecticut Coastal Area Management Act if the adverse impacts are mitigated by adding water dependent use such as a public access walkway or a car top boat launch to the site and reserve parking spaces for the public. We hope these comments are helpful to the Commission. Pursuant to Connecticut General Statute, Section 22A-110, we request that these comments be read into the record for a public hearing for this application. If it can be of further assistance to you in any other coastal management or Long Island Sound related matter, please feel free to contact me, 860-424-3138, Carol Semensky, Environment Analyst 2. Did she talk to Kevin about this? Because it seems like she's writing code, she's writing our code, which is fine. I think some of the suggestions are useful, but were her and Kevin on the same page with this?
Well, your first question was, did she talk to Kevin prior to writing that letter or after?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Are they on the same page? I don't know. We did discuss this briefly, this letter this afternoon briefly with Mr. Doyle.
Yeah.
Most of those requirements are a little bit,
Well, they'd have to. Heavy-handed.
they're weird.
Well, can she, is there any way we
That's
can have
like-
her come down and explain this to me, please? Because I would
Well,
really prefer.
I would prefer not
Sit down
to do
and
that.
go over all these things.
Can we summon
I think, can we subpoena her
No.
to come here?
She doesn't work for the town of Guilford, she works
Well,
for.
it seems like she does with a letter
DEP.
like that.
Yeah, if you read that carefully, most of that stuff is kind of like common sense, and of course, you're gonna have the necessary restaurants. They have to comply with the parking requirements.
You're gonna have the public,
Rest-
you're gonna have the public launch?
Restroom, whether the yacht club allows transient access to their facilities, is kind of a separate question. Whether they provide access for transients, to tie up there and visit the yacht club or visit the restaurant, that's also a separate question. That is a reasonable question to ask, probably associated with a special permit. The question about public access, most of her comments relate to public access. And frankly, I don't know the right word to characterize that, but right now, there is zero public access at the Guilford Yacht Club. The public is not allowed to enter the premises under any circumstances unless they're a guest of the member. There is no public access there whatsoever. Frankly, creating a restaurant, although she doesn't consider a restaurant to be a water-dependent use, would provide substantial public access to the resource, because the restaurant, by its definition, is open to the public. You can't discriminate against some people at a restaurant and not others. We have civil rights laws and all of that. So if you open a public restaurant, it's open to the public based on the hours of operation and so forth. And therefore, there will be substantial public access. The yacht club has talked about a little bit. If you've ever been on the premises there, they have this beautiful kind of lawn area that overlooks the river and the marsh and everything. And presumably, patrons of the restaurant would be able to visit that lawn area, kind of walk around and look at the scenery, and that would be highly desirable public access. She talked about the possibility as an either or, I think, in her first comment there, about having some kind of public boat launch. I've got to believe that the yacht club is opposed to that. That issue came up once before when the yacht clubs were originally approved and was not made a part of their application. There are physical limitations on how that could actually happen. But the other stuff that she kind of talks about there that is not related to the public access is stuff that would be part of any site plan special permit application. The requirements for parking and restrooms, et cetera. So
When she was talking about the restaurant not being water use or marina use.
She says it's not a water dependent
Yeah,
use.
but if we, as a state, I think, and especially as the town of Guilford, has determined that marinas, restaurants are ancillary use to marinas, then how
We've determined that clubhouses,
Yeah.
limited to the membership and guests of the marina, are part of the marina, and therefore that's an ancillary.
And that's restaurant services.
But that's not public access either.
No, it's not public access, but the idea of it being a restaurant is the same. I mean, they just
The
yeah, except-
restaurant is by definition open to the public.
Oh, so I guess you're saying that
So the
where you get
gatehouse wouldn't be
food.
there anymore?
They've talked about redesigning that, if they develop a restaurant there, and you folks can answer this question better than I can, but if they do develop a restaurant, they may redesign the site a little bit. Maybe the gatehouse would be changed in some configuration, because you would presumably want to make it inviting to the public to come there. What they would do with the gatehouse and how they would rearrange the parking, all of that is probably subject to further discussion on their part, should they decide they want to do a restaurant.
Yes, I think your description's accurate. One simple answer is during the hours. It's Tom Davis at Boston Street and Guilford Yacht Club. A simple answer is during the hours of operation, the gate can be put up and would be put up. So the requirement of having people coming down this road to use the restaurant for the hours it's available is pretty simply taken care of just by that.
Security for the boats. I mean, boats are incredibly valuable, and there's a lot of them. How would you maintain security for the boats with the public coming and going?
Well, we have areas where the marina slips, the walkways down to the boats. They're pretty carefully sectioned off. We have areas that are member parking now, and we have guest parking in a separate area. And if it were to come to an issue where we thought that people were going to be wandering onto the docks, which we wouldn't allow for no other reason, liability issues, we just make sure that that's clearly marked, and we'd have staff available to guide people to the right action. I think that's very typical. I think that's the case certainly at Pilot's Point or at any of the Brewers type marinas.
In your vision of this, do you anticipate that this lawn area that George mentioned is so beautiful, and I'm not familiar with it, but if you do this, do you think that the restaurant patrons would be able to use the lawn area to admire the area, or would that be sequestered away from the
No,
public?
the place where we're set up, where right now it's outdoor seating, is on that upper lawn, and absolutely, that's the kind of pick spot to sit and have lunch and enjoy the environment, and that is absolutely part of the experience of going to the restaurant.
And finally, and I know you don't know this, but do you, in your vision, do you anticipate that at some point it would be the kind of facility where you would have weddings and receptions and other types of public events where, not that that's a bad thing, because we don't really have anything like that in Guilford, I don't think, but you know like how there's woodwinds in Branford, where if you have like Joe's retirement dinner was there. Do
Guilford
you
Yacht
think-
Club is used that way, with a catering arrangement currently. So
So the public already goes there?
you can arrange to use the facility, parts of the facility, for that kind of use, and it's very common. We have almost every nice weekend in the spring and summer, there's a wedding event. Sometimes it's members and sometimes it's not.
Place? Like, how big is it?
You should come down. It's-
I can't get past the gate. I got in trouble because I rode my
You may be
motorcycle
the
there
only
once.
person in town who doesn't know the gate code. But no, it's a large facility. It's great. It's really nice. Premium facility. Have a look at the website, because the website shows very clearly all of those things.
I have a quick question, maybe it's relevant, maybe it's not. In the past, we've addressed some ownership / right-of-way issues with Arrow.
The yacht club has deeded right-of-way over that so-called Page's Lane. So presumably, that deeded right-of-way would also permit the public to use that road to access a public restaurant. That's a question the yacht club would have to resolve, I would think, before they would actually.
I only ask because I know
Implement
people that
this.
have been arrested for walking
Right.
up the road. Believe
Is
it.
that right?
Yeah,
For walking on the road that goes to the yacht club, people have been arrested?
yes.
So there's a letter, Patrick. Do you want me to read this in, or?
Which road is that?
It's dated November 21st.
Our application record?
Yeah, it's your application, Brad. Or do you feel like you've adequately summed everything up? Because if you do, I won't read it in, but if you don't,
I believe we've summed
Okay, that's fine.
Somebody asked the question earlier, I guess it was Rich, about, what type of restaurant would be allowed? We don't distinguish in our zoning code the various types of restaurants. The zoning code says restaurant. More specifically, there's no definition. It says restaurants and other food and beverage service establishments, excluding drive-through. I think it would be fair that there would be no exclude drive-through in this particular location. So a restaurant is whatever is defined in other law. Presumably, the state health code, I know, has definition for restaurants. I know to serve alcohol, you need permits from the state, and the state may put certain limitations on the serving of alcoholic beverages. Again, that's all outside the framework of zoning. What happens at a restaurant in terms of like hours of operation, extent of alcohol consumption, the extent of non-restaurant related entertainment that might be ancillary to a restaurant, those things are all outside the framework of the zoning code. We say restaurants, and that means whatever your heart desires in terms of a restaurant, as long as it's compliant with other laws and codes.
Just a question.
Yes.
Just to get this, my mind totally around this. You are here just to get the Table 5 amendment changed.
Correct.
You haven't, there may not even be a restaurant. You just want the ability to have it.
That's exactly right. Before we go down the path of even working with the slip owners to make sure there are enough people in agreement to do it, we want to make sure that it's an option that we can do, rather than go down that path and then find out that it was not an option anyway.
That's it. I want to get my mind around that one first, rather than what if it was coming.
Right.
And then I understand if it's been presented this way, that you're going to remain on the existing footprint of the building. You're not going to have any building expansion to do
Correct.
this.
So
That would be down the line.
If we say yes to this, then they can enlarge it if they want, if they so choose, just up to code.
As long as it complies with all the other standards and criteria of zoning and building and so forth, yes.
Right, so-
Unless you were to limit it by special permit. Because it's a special permit, as someone said, you have quite a bit more discretion with regard to the nature and details of operation of the particular facility. You could put hours of operation limitations, whereas a by right restaurant, you might be less able to do that. You could put limitations on the size, you could put limitations on the
Amplified music, lighting.
outside music, outside dining, all those kinds of things could be limited under the auspices of the special permit.
And this,
Currently, pardon me, I think currently there are limitations on those things in place for the use of the club facility by its members and by guests and so on now, and we, make every effort to comply with those, so. Certainly, the scale that we envision today is going to fit well under any of the kind of things you're suggesting, not that you don't want to make sure that there's
We just need to make sure.
appropriate
I have one question,
limitations,
and I'm trying to figure something out, and just humor me. But if you rent it to a wedding party, do they automatically become guests of members of the club? Is that how you justify?
The way that you work to do a wedding or an event like that at the club is you work with Gourmet Galley, who's the caterer based out of Stonington, that is the operator of that, and the contract is made with them.
but they'll have a sponsor, a member sponsor or something like that?
For each event, Gourmet Galley proposes the date to the unit owners, and the unit owners then approve the date by virtue of accepting that guest and that contract for that party. So for each and every event, there's an approval, allowing the guest, the party, to attend or to use the Guilford Yacht Club facility. So we do have that convention.
In effect, for that
So
afternoon,
we
yeah.
appreciate the answers. Let's try to stick to this, because we could ask questions all night about this.
How many other commercial properties are there in the MR1 zone?
George said that there's,
To my knowledge, the only others are Bayberry and the Brown Boatyard across the
You
street.
know what is?
It's, Woodmark is in that zone, isn't it?
No, that's an industrial zone.
So, I mean, if we were to change the zoning as a broad thing, Brown's Boatyard could become Brown's Bar and Boatyard, and
Theoretically.
Bayberry Creek could be Bayberry Creek.
Well, so they don't have those apartments.
And, yeah, it used to be a gathering hall, but now I think it's apartments.
Yeah, they would have the same ability to apply for a special permit as would this property owner. And
Is there a way to do it specific to the yacht club as opposed to categorically?
that's a good question. Actually, Carol alludes to one possibility in that regard, and to the extent that this sort of runs up against the concept of spot zoning. But for example, you could limit the size of the parcel to which you would be, within which you would be eligible to apply for a special permit. If you didn't have more than X acres, you wouldn't be able to apply for a special permit. And so therefore, you could preclude other property owners that have less than X, whatever it is. Follow me?
Before we would do that, I'd like to pass it on.
Because I wrote it as spot zone.
Yeah,
That's exclusionary.
if it only allows.
All set,
I'll move to continue the public hearing unless there are any. Second.
do we, hold on. Oh, yeah, well, we have to, but I just want to see if there's anybody that wants to ask a question from the public at this time of the applicant. Okay. And, yeah, we could do that too now.
I haven't heard Brian speak. Hey, Brian?
Yay, welcome back. Yeah, I haven't been here in a while.
We missed
Brian-
you.
Brian McGlone, Economic Development Coordinator in the town. I got to say, Rich, I'm amazed that you have never been to the yacht club for a wedding, a banquet, a seminar, or some other event. I don't know exactly, but I think they do close to 40 weddings a year there. So the good news is they do 40 weddings, and you don't know it, or nobody knows about it, because it's not quiet, it's not noisy, it's controlled, so
They do this.
it could. But, I mean, the place holds about 150 seats currently. So even if they do a restaurant, unless they choose to build on, which they'd have to go through the whole building process and approval process, But they have seating in place for, and it's around 150, because I've run seminars there. So seating, parking, bathrooms, septic, all those critical infrastructure are already in place to support that number. Like I said, I have been there over the years for probably a half a dozen weddings or more, and that greenery that we're talking about, I mean, people love to go out and sit and view it and see, you know, the whole waterfront again. Again, everything's by special permit, so you're going to have another look. Should they decide to go forward, you're going to have another look, critical look, at what time you might make other conditions of approval, should they want to do that. In my role even, I say they've been a good neighbor in that we a couple of years ago, we went to the yacht club. We wanted to run a business seminar for our business owners in town. And we had about 110 people and businesses show up. And they didn't charge us for that. They were like, hey, this is a good thing for the town, and they didn't rent us the space. So I thought that was good. They've worked with the chamber, at least the last couple of years, asking, I'm calling them a goodie bag. They want, you know, stuffers, restaurant menus, shop lists, all the things, museums, all the things in town in a little goodie bag. And I'm saying the harbor master, and it might be the wrong person, but they asked for about 50 bags at the beginning of the season. So if they do have transient boats come through, and or even some of their own current owners, you know, they like to give these and share them and bring the people from the yacht club into town and supporting our businesses. So, I mean, I think they've really, you know, been good about that. And we certainly appreciate how they try to help support the overall businesses. And I guess, you know, I want to just bring up one last point, and I think you were almost getting to it, Josh. You know, go back a year or so ago when the Stonehouse closed, and we took away that public viewing and public use of a waterfront area. It went, I mean, the town was going crazy over that. So here's an opportunity to possibly bring back something, or at least for sure, it's going to allow a certain amount of the public to go there and view that, enjoy that, and have that waterfront experience. So I honestly thought this was a relatively minor change to the MR1 because it is such a confining area. And even though Brown's Boatyard or Bayberry are in the zone, they too would have to go through all the regulations. So potentially, could a restaurant be there? Yes. But they'd have to meet all the special permit conditions and septic and all the things we talked about, and parking and traffic and so on. So I would like to see the amendment get changed. So
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak in favor? Anybody like to speak against?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Let's continue to the next meeting. Thank you, guys. Revised agenda. Should I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, we have no deliberation. Some applications to be received.
May Bloomer Hoyt, 986 Lease Island Road, map 11, lot 19, zone R5, coastal area management for addition of a 12 by 23 deck, section 27391, receive and set public hearing date for 2/21/18.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We got some correspondence, guys. Request received from William Gozi regarding a Blackberry Ridge subdivision on Westlake Avenue, requesting a 90-day extension of the time to file the subdivision map in the town clerk.
Make a motion to give them the 90-day extension.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Request from Guilford Land Conservation Trust for support grant request under the Connecticut DEEP Open Space and Watershed Land Acquisition Program to purchase a 30-acre parcel in Westwoods. This property is listed as a priority in the Plan of Conservation and Development.
Land Trust is requesting that you authorize me to write a letter on your behalf endorsing their grant application to purchase this property. It's a key parcel in the Westwoods complex. I think it's kind of the last remaining private parcel there, and this is a real...
motion to authorize George to do
Second.
that.
Discussion, none? All in favor?
Aye. Motion to pay the bills?
All in favor of that? Aye. Have we read the minutes? Are we all okay? Nothing's
Make a
substantial.
motion to approve them?
Second.
Discussion? No? All in favor? Aye. Okay.
Motion to close meeting?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thanks, guys.
In the middle